We are now joined by Brenden Fraher from Game Refinery. How are you doing today, Brenden?
Hey James, wonderful to see you.
You have bested the rain.
Well, I'm Irish, so it's not, let's say, my first rodeo.
Exactly. Unfortunately, to explain, we're on day 2 of the show here, and the weather has turned against us, and so it's considerably quieter. The government has said people should stay at home, which is not ideal for an event. But we've all managed to make our way in and have a chat. And in fact, we were supposed to talk in San Francisco, and you were beaten by the airline that time, weren't you? So we've bested everything. You're here now. Do tell us, finally, what is Game Refinery? What do you folks do?
Sure, absolutely. So we're the leading insight provider on feature trends, live event analysis, and player engagement, let's say, as well. So all of this, let's say, wrapped up together.
Got you. Now, I understand that you used to be fairly single platform, focusing on mobile, but recently you've branched out a little bit. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess it's no secret that we're seeing, let's say, especially in the HD space, free to play, free to start, let's say, is generating, let's say, a lot of, let's say, traction, let's say, and momentum.
Yes.
And then the number one, I would say, test lab for free to play, let's say, engagement, of course, is mobile, right? So what we've been doing is we've been analyzing all of these, free to start, let's say, free to play, let's say, games on the console, Xbox, PlayStation, Steam, let's say, platforms, because a lot of the developers there will be looking to what are the best, let's say, engagement mechanics and so on, and they're already there. Because I guess maybe before, let's say 5 years ago, there was an idea, well, these are mobile games, these are mobile players, and then now these are, let's say, PC, or I play PlayStation, and so on, right? And the games are quite different. Now, those genre lines, or those let's say, platform and genre, let's say, barriers, very much, let's say, grayer, let's say, and so on. So
I think people have become a lot more platform agnostic, where people will just move between screens because everything is everywhere. If people are playing Fortnite, they're doing it on their Switch and on their mobile and on their PC via the same accounts. It's that kind of somewhere it's centralized, all the data, and you can just push it to whatever screen you want.
Another way of looking at it is audiences are looking for experiences. The medium doesn't really matter now, right? And maybe before, I guess I remember when Xbox, let's say, came out, Xbox One, it was like, oh, we have this second screen, it's like we have our phone and we have like our tablet and so on. Well, no, these are actually just different mediums, and the experience, let's say, follows, let's say, the player as well. Good example would be Call of Duty Warzone, right? Where you have Call of Duty Warzone now on mobile, let's say, as well. Same progression, you can do, let's say, your XP, you can do your cosmetics, you can buy, let's say, and so on. So when you're not, let's say, in front of, let's say, your Xbox or your PC or whatever, you can do your grinds, let's say, elsewhere. But what's really interesting is a lot of people are even just staying, let's say, on Warzone as well. And then, let's say, dipping into Call of Duty Mobile as well for that other experience.
Well, given that you've initially focused on mobile, now you've branched down into the other platforms. We've talked about some of the similarities between these things. What about the differences? Have you noticed that you have to treat certain platforms different than others with what you do, or have you discovered that actually it's a lot closer than you previously thought?
Funnily enough, it's a lot closer than you think, right? Again, those genre, let's say, and those platform, let's say, and barriers, let's say, have really come down. What we're calling it is, a new phrase alert, right? The audience web, right? Okay. Because if you think about it, it's like, I've watched Fallout, let's say, TV show, and then you see, people, playing Fallout, and the game went up like by 300%, or let's say, or something like that. Really, really interesting, right? And again, there was a lot of oh, wow, we didn't realize this was going to happen. It's like, well, I don't think it should be, let's say, a major surprise, right? Same thing, let's say, with Last of Us, when it was out, let's say, HBO. Obviously not the biggest, let's say, bounce and so on, but there was just so much more Fallout, let's say, out there and so on. And it goes back to audiences are looking for experiences. I watched the show, I binged on it, I'd like to do some more, let's say, Fallout, bang, there's 4 games already there, let's say, that people can play.
There was a lot of discussion after the Fallout show, because everyone's saying this feels like a missed opportunity, because, as you say, there's lots of Fallout games people can jump into, but the fact that there isn't a new Fallout prep to come out in the next month or two to coincide with this, everyone's saying there would have been an enormous release for that game had it been considered, or had people known it was going to be such a hit on TV.
Indeed, right. Now we're going to come back, let's say, to my earlier point, let's say, about engaging mechanics and so on. So there was Bethesda did actually have something, let's say, lined up, which was the next gen patch, let's say, for Fallout 4, which again was really good. Granted, it did come out, let's say, a week after, right? But they also have a live service game called Fallout 76, right? And as you can imagine, a lot of, let's say, the revenue went up, and that's people, buying all of the stuff and so on. Sure, there could be a little bit more vertical integration, let's say, with the show. Maybe having, let's say, a lot more, let's say, of the weapons, maybe the characters and stuff like that, to really kind of, pull people in a little bit and whatever. But then that's also another very interesting, let's say, game as well, 76, where it's live service, there are events and stuff like that, but obviously it could be, let's say, a little bit more, right? And that's where I think developers should be really looking, let's say, to mobile and so on. Like, if there's a couple of, let's say, big, let's say, games like, I don't want to mention too many of them, right? But there's a mobile version and there's a HD version. And when people look at the events inside of the HD version, it's like, yeah, I have this AAA, let's say, experience, but it's really just visuals, let's say, and stuff like that. And I play it and it's like, I think maybe the damnedest praise I've ever seen, where it was like, it's a great podcast game, right?
Wow.
Right, which I think is like, yeah.
Brutal.
Okay, brutal, right? Brutal. But then they prefer to play the mobile version because there's so many more events, and stuff like that. Sure, a lot of these events are designed to keep the players, let's say, inside, so maybe you can monetize more, let's say, as well. But there's a lot of these aren't, let's say, necessarily paid to win, but it's like, yeah, you can monetize, let's say, if you want, but we keep you, let's say, engaged. So imagine audiences are being trained, let's say, on a lot of this expectation, let's say, is there and so on. So you go, let's, maybe to the same IP, you're playing it, let's say, on HD, and it's like, oh, it's a podcast game, right? Maybe not the best.
What about genres themselves? We talked about some specific IPs there, but we noticed that hybrid casual is now generating, say, like 800% more monthly revenue than hyper casual, which was the previous kind of big explosion, certainly on mobile. Do we think this is just a fashion trend thing? Genres rise and fall, and there's nothing necessarily that they were doing wrong, it just their time came and their time went? Or do you think it's a situation where the people who came in for the hyper-casual games, the very simple, easy, 30-second turnaround or even 10-second loops, are now asking for something a little bit more? Do you think they're demanding more sophistication?
You got it. That's exactly it, right? So if you think how games, let's say, were very basic, let's say, before, right? Let's say something, what I always call like something like your mother would play it, right? Now, people laugh at that, haha, but it's like, yeah, those casual games, that is the biggest entertainment medium on the planet, right? By like people think, oh yeah, it's like the HD Xbox. No, PlayStation is nothing compared to casual games. And even, let's say, hyper casual, let's say, inside there as well, enormous, just given the number of the people, let's say, who actually play it. But a couple of years ago, they were pretty basic, right? And then it was like, okay, maybe we want, let's say, audiences like maybe want like a little bit more. And then it's like, okay, well, what do they want? And it's like, okay, let's put a couple of wait streaks inside there. Or let's put like some collectibles, because we know in casual, that's what they like. So it's really kind of slowly, people are being slow boiled, let's say, to it. It's not that, let's say, you go and maybe, not to knock them down, I mean, they're fantastic games, but something, let's say, like a Playrix, let's say, game, or a Playtika game, or stuff like that, you get in, and there is so much going on. Maybe like a little bit, maybe like, too much. But with the hybrid casual, it's like, oh, I can play a quick game, but no, I can play with friends. Oh, there's a partner event. Oh, there's collectibles. Oh, I can do, let's say, this renovation event, let's say, as well, right? And of course, that's the thing, because audiences are looking, let's say, for more, right? Plus it keeps them, let's say, more engaged.
Well, coming back to Game Refinery, what do you feel it is that you folks do different from other people within your field? What would you consider your sort of USP if people are going to come to work with you?
Yeah, for sure. So I think like a lot of the data providers, let's say, out there are really on revenue and downloads. Look, let's go through, let's say, what's happened, let's say, on the market. And again, they're really, really good at that. I think that's very, very important. But with Game Refinery, it's why has it happened? And that's where we really get into. Like, what are the building blocks of the games? What have people been bringing, right? Then what can you learn from that, let's say, as well? Then not only, let's say, about what have they been bringing, but how is that working inside the game? So we have all of the live events, let's say, of the top games as well. And then taking it to the next level, again, going back to the audience web, right? Where on the motivations, what motivates them, let's say, to play, right? And what are the different, let's say, player archetypes and stuff like that. And then when you understand those, how does that, what, let's say, would be, let's say, those live event frameworks that really work with those and those features, let's say, as well. Because of course, everything, let's say, is all connected.
How have you found the gathering of data has been affected by the sort of information clampdown that happened on the mobile platforms? There was that little rollout, a few years back.
Yeah.
Everyone decided that you can't collect anywhere near as much data points as you used to be able to. So how has that affected the way in which you gather and analyze data as it comes?
Well, we are a little bit different, right? So we actually do all the analysis, let's say, ourselves, let's say, internally. So we don't have any, let's say, dependency, let's say, like on external data. Mm-hmm. Plus, we're all, let's say, on fact-based. So we're a very good Nordic, let's say, company. It's like, look, the facts are these, this is how it is. We're not saying, oh, we see, let's say, how things are going. It's like, look, and it's really kind of, let's say, down to that. So it's not necessarily collecting data, let's say, on users, so to speak, but seeing what the reality is, and then you can see the directionality, and then you think, oh, okay, I see things, let's say, coming, let's say, more from a macro, let's say, point of view, as opposed to, okay, I want to target, let's say, these particular players. How can I bombard them, throw the spaghetti, and then see, let's say, what sticks? It's a different way of looking at it.
Gotcha. Well, with that in mind, usually I'd ask people what their plans for 2024 was, but given the nature of what you do, what do you predict for happening in 2024? Based on the data you've been able to gather, the trends that you're noticing, the rise and fall, what are you anticipating to see in the market, both mobile and console, over the next 6 to 12 months?
So definitely a lot more, let's say, on the engagement, the player engagement, right? That's definitely the real war zone, right? Because players or audiences, right? It doesn't even matter, oh, I'm a PC player, let's say, or whatever, I'm a PlayStation player. They really only have a certain amount of time. I'm always, let's say, reminded, let's say, of the Netflix, our biggest competition, let's say, is sleep, right? So if you think of it, let's say, like that, like what a media company would say, it's like we want to keep people, let's say, inside. So people pay a lot of money for, like, UA, like, trying to, let's say, gather the users, but keeping them in, that's, let's say, the main thing. And understanding, let's say, what do they want and stuff, that's, let's say, we're going to see, let's say, a lot of, let's say, companies, let's say, really, looking at it.
It's all about retention.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, interesting. All right, well, finally got to talk to you. Fantastic. Glad you were able to make it. And hopefully see you at the next show. Maybe
Absolutely.
A little bit drier.
Thank you so much, sir.